Obviously, burning gasoline and diesel from cars, trucks, and buses is literally the leading source of carbon emissions in the state of New York. The #1 energy user and a top CO2 emitter is also buildings, right? And so my clean fuel standards bill requires the development of a clean fuel standard in New York State and reduces greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector and to achieve the goals set forth in the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, right? What we lovingly call the CLCPA, right? Poor air quality increases healthcare costs and generates more trips to hospitals. It creates more instances of asthma. Another reason carbon dioxide is important, it dissolves in the ocean. This is important. I'm trying not to go into too much, and I have a bunch of notes about the science. I think people here kind of know about the science and how this stuff works. I think what's more important here is kind of how we get to a place of understanding where we should be, right? And there's a lot of work that needs to be done when we look at the CLCPA, right? We actually began in the most obvious place, Walter, which is like we looked at generation, right? And years ago, right, we created RGGI, right? We've known this for a long time, right? You know, we created RGGI over a decade ago, right? The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, right? Where we, created a cap on CO2 for generators, right? We've aggressively created programs in the state of New York, like New York Sun and the Green Bank, that have they're some of the best funded programs around initiating energy, development of a clean energy economy here in the state of New York, and particularly solar. And clearly, early on, I was a big proponent for utility scale projects, right? And continue to be that. I mean, I'm not saying we should not, put, solar panels on people's houses, or people want to put up a wind turbine, go for it. But that's not going to get us to where we need to get to, right? And it certainly, obviously, leaves out a lot of Black, Latino, and low-income communities generally that can't afford these systems, right? Even with the generous programs and rebates that both the state and the federal government have to implement those things, right? And so we begin in that process. We need to do a lot better in that process around siting, right? Around providing some universal standards around the state, around how you site both solar and wind turbines. We have a significant balance that we have to achieve between alienating agricultural lands and siting solar projects. My colleague, Senator Hinchy, is very passionate about that as the chair of the Agriculture Committee. And she sits on the Energy Committee, and we have lots of important conversations about that, but that is a balance that we're really going to have to strike, particularly as we look at these issues around supply chains and trying to bring more of our supply chain back into the U.S., and particularly as we compete for that, obviously, back into New York State. New York State is and even a kid from Brooklyn like me knows that New York State is a huge supplier of agricultural products. In fact, our gross receipts in the state of New York is mostly, its #1 thing is agriculture, right? And if you don't know, we're like the #2 producer of apples in the country. We're the 3rd largest dairy producer. We're the largest yogurt producer in the country. The 2nd largest apple tree producer. We're 2nd in terms of snap peas and sweet corn. 3rd in terms of hard products, right? And we can go on and on about what we produce. And a lot of that is going to be more and more necessary as we kind of get into a place where water becomes less available in other parts of the country, as we see the Colorado River and other places drying up, right? And so we have to think about, what is New York producing and how are we doing that? And then also, again, balancing that with this whole dynamic of having to create more space for solar, right? And doing it on a very, very large scale, right? Some of the areas that let me just talk about 2 other things too. The interconnection piece is huge, right? We don't have a really good process, Kim, for how these projects are plugged in. I'm just picking on you as you here. And we just have to have a better process about how these new connections, whether it's offshore wind, right, or onshore solar, or whatever, are plugging into the grid. Our interconnection process is really right now clumsy and is not serving anyone. And we also need to make sure that we start dealing with the transmission lines. Our transmission system has not been in any kind of significant way upgraded in many, many years. We have to look at creating more microgrids and creating some incentives for microgrids. I have some legislation that would do it around public housing in the state. But we should be looking at hospital programs, any kind of contained communities or anything that's important for us to protect. We should be hardening those systems with microgrids as well. There's a lot that needs to be done, again, around the physical infrastructure of our state. We live in an old state, right? I'm not the only thing old in this room, right? Like, stop playing with me. That we live in an old state. We have old buildings, not the Capitol, not the Albany Capitol Center, which is new and shiny, right? But there's a lot of old buildings even here in Albany, right? Certainly, I'm just telling Kim I'm having a gas problem in my house, and she's like, "Oh, you okay?" And I'm trying to make sure we're good. I'm like, "No, the problem is I have a 150-year-old house, and right? And so every time something goes wrong, like none of the parts exist, right? And like having to retrofit all of these old buildings is a real thing, not just for residents, but also for commercial buildings around the state. And that's going to be an important part of what we need to continue to incentivize and to educate people that need to be done, because again, a clean energy economy that does not have buildings that are airtight, essentially we're throwing money out the window, right? And then we also need to deal with the issue of demand response. We simply just have a set of citizens who just don't understand demand response. Right? And it's not their fault they don't understand, right? Having grown up in the 70s, I remember being on gas lines with my father. But I also remember being in school where they were kind of, the first time teaching us at the time, calling it ecology, right? And conservation, right? And then I used to, it was reinforced to me after I came home, my father told me to turn off the damn lights. Why he was so upset. And now that I actually own the home, I actually understand why he walked around in a sweater all day. And so the idea of demand response has to be something that we have to teach to our young people in our schools, but also to parents and homeowners and everyone, so they actually understand the best times and the worst times to use energy. And again, transportation is a big part of it. We have about 2.5 million vehicles here in the state of New York that either need to be electrified or use alternative energy. And that does not talk about watercrafts. In fact, we just actually introduced a bill recently that would provide some incentives around watercraft and dealing with them as well. And so there's lots and lots and lots to do. And I think Donnell had a lot of really good points as he spoke right prior to me, and talked about the issues around, spoken to the issues around both electrification and alternative energy, right? And so here, let me go back to a political point in that we have not been able to get this bill passed in both houses and signed by the governor, in part because of literally one or two people, right? Like literally one or two people, right? We have the votes for it and can't bring it because everybody's afraid of smokestacks, because of a bunch of eco-terrorists who want to hold up a process that they think is going to be better by trying to get the whole loaf instead of trying to take a half loaf now and working towards goals that we've actually agreed to set, right? And so it continues to be just highly frustrating. But I run for re-election and ask you to continue to be in the fight with me, because this stuff is important. It's critically important. And unfortunately, a lot of the folks who are concerned with the environment are not they're not necessarily concerned with the economy of our communities, right? And they don't understand industry, and they don't understand how important, right now the energy industry generally is about the 6th largest industry in the state of New York, and is important and huge employer, and actually has a potential to be even a larger employer, particularly as we start growing the clean energy economy in our state. And so by not providing and not allowing a low fuel, clean energy low fuel standard, they hurt not only our ability to reach our CLCPA goals, but they also hurt industry, they actually artificially inflate the prices of energy and keep us from the very goals that they believe that they're trying to champion. Emerging low carbon products could be used to substitute for fossil fuel products and fossil fuel based products to reduce overall GHG emissions, especially for products that are hard to electrify, because everything can't be electrified easily, right? Again, in the economic sector, no jobs will be lost in the transition, and we can train the workforce to establish increase high-paying jobs. Home heating oil is a $4 billion industry and produces 8,609 full-time jobs at a living wage with benefits. We should be selective with bioproducers we work with and give preference to those who only accept sustainable products and use renewable raw materials. We should identify bioenergy pathways with high life cycle energy efficiency and high emission reductions, and this includes land harvest, conversions, and delivery to the end user that replace fossil fuels and complement the next generation energy delivery systems. Now, New York State law requires increased biodiesel blends in home heating oil, 5% by July 1st, 2022, which we just passed, 10% by July 1st, 2025, and 20% by July 1st, 2030. 10% biodiesel eliminates 100 million gallons of heating B10 oil. That's the equivalent of making 102,000 homes carbon neutral, and 20% blend produces a 14.6% reduction in CO2 emissions of B20 and better GHG performance than natural gas, right? 50% biodiesel use eliminates 500 million gallons of B50 heating oil and 4.29 million metric tons of carbon, while 100% biodiesel use eliminates heating oil and 8.59 million metric tons of carbon, right? However, we need even more innovation in this area. Production capabilities for low carbon production are lacking in the Northeast, and additional defining monitoring of markets, research, and education are needed for use and promotion of these products. These fuels will provide 100% cleaner emissions, but they lose carbon intensity score due to the power needed to run the plants and the fuel used to transport it, right? So as the grid continues to get cleaner, and if the state adopts a clean fuel standard for medium and heavy duty trucks, the carbon savings of using biodiesel and renewable diesel will continue to increase, right? So this is a growth area, and there's actually even an industry in doing the research around these important gains. So going forward, bioenergy will play a pivotal role in realizing a critical aim of the CLCPA by making sure that climate justice and underserved communities are prioritized in the state's clean energy conservation and our conversion to that. The inability to bring in efficient and affordable clean heating and cooling solutions to climate justice communities are major obstacles for effectively reducing our carbon footprint overall. Replacing fossil fuels with biofuels produced from renewable organic matter promises to mitigate climate change, diminishes dependence on foreign energy sources, and promotes economic development in the countries that produce the crops used as biofeedstocks. However, it will be necessary that we use creative solutions to utilize abandoned lands and waste materials to produce biofuels, and that does not include our co-processing. I guess I'm getting to the end. There are other legislation that we are pushing that I'd like to see us work on. The first one is S9014A. That's S9014A. This is a bill related to bioheating fuel requirements, increases the minimum content, right? That's the biofuel bill. And then there's the S8360, which maintains a continued viability of the state's existing biomass facilities, which is located within the military installation. And this is the Fort Drum bill. right, which I think is important, as well as S3217A, which creates a credit for production of biomethane. And this biomethane production tax credit will help improve the environment by making better use of waste and conserving natural resources, right? So there's a lot for us to do, but we can get it done if we work together. And I'm happy to be part of this conversation and looking forward to our continued work together. God bless you all.